Shadows where the truth hides deep. Echoes of the lost and the secrets they keep. Cold cases burn in the back of your mind. We dig through the dark, one, two at a time. This ain't fiction, this is blood, this is truth. 12-gauge investigative, justice uncaged. We ask the questions that you scared to say, shining a light where the guilty pray from killers. This is 12-gauge investigative. Let's jump in. We're built for the case. Just getting started. Justice is just getting started. 12-gauge investigative. We don't miss.
All right. I was muted. That's awesome. My name is 12 Gauge, and welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. I hope everybody's doing okay tonight, and I hope that you're ready for an awesome show. I have two special guests in the back room waiting to blow your mind with their information and education about a lot of different things. So, true crime is in effect tonight, and we're going to talk about the Mickey Stines murder case. So I'm going to bring up the special guests and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. Okay, who'd like to go first?
I yield to the young lady.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Hey, Andy.
Yeah.
Welcome again. Glad to see you.
You bet. Your timing is actually immaculate because we just found out tomorrow the premiere episode of Unknown Serial Killers that I filmed for the Oxygen Channel on prolific serial killer Coral Eugene Watts will be airing their first segment tomorrow evening at 6 and 7 Central Time. So, aficionados, you're not going to want to miss tomorrow night on the Oxygen Channel. This segment will blow you away.
Okay, what's that again?
It's the Oxygen Channel. They're premiering a new show called America's Most Unknown Serial Killers. I filmed with them last summer, and so the premiere episode, coincidentally, is the one that I filmed with them. And it has to do with a Houston-based serial killer named Coral Eugene Watts, who murdered 13 Houston area women 1981, 1982, and it is credited with over 40 nationally. He is the nation's most prolific serial killer no one has ever heard of. But effective tomorrow night at 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Central, the entire country will now know the true nature of Coral Eugene Watts.
Very interesting.
Well, I will check that out for sure. I will check that out for sure. So have y'all had any insight on this case that I'm about to present tonight?
I have a few that I'd like to. It seems like has the and I noticed
You were cutting out, but there, can you repeat that?
are you hearing that?
I'm sorry, chat. We do understand that there's an echo. We're trying to get it fixed.
Um, on my sounds. On.
Maybe if you turn your sound down on your phone a little bit.
Yeah, my volume.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
So one thing I noticed in the court TV clips that they're discussing him having a panic attack in the middle of being questioned, and the way that they're kind of talking about it is a little bit criticizing. I felt that it was a bit negative in terms of reflecting on his panic attacks and his anxiety disorder in general. The journalist mentioned something about, him having a sudden panic attack, like it was, like a convenient, like, oh, he suddenly had a panic attack. But I'd like to be clear that panic attacks, when they happen to people, they're very, they're not scheduled in people's day. Usually when people have anxiety disorders, they're, they come on quite suddenly, and in stressful, situations where people are under duress. And, that's why they're called panic attacks, is they do come on very quickly. And it's not something that is unusual, I don't think, in a situation like that. So I just wanted to point that out, that, he does mention having been bit by a tick in the past and having encephalitis. I don't know if that came up after he was already arrested. It seems like he had already been arrested and then he was being questioned, and it later came up by his attorney, I believe. And so, encephalitis is one of the symptoms of Lyme disease, and it can be extremely debilitating. It can cause a myriad of different symptoms, including panic disorders and memory problems and things like that. But it's important, I think, in this case to point out that he was gainfully employed at the time of the murder. People that suffer from severe neuroborreliosis is what it's called when Lyme disease goes to the brain. That is like a stage 4 Lyme disease symptom. And people usually aren't at that point able to maintain like normal daily functions in life. Certainly having a job that's a full-time position where, someone goes to work every day, that's extremely unusual for someone with stage 4 Lyme disease. And so is things like word recollection in order to have like logical discussions. Clearly he was attempting to have what the judge assumed would be a logical conversation when he accepted that meeting. He went there that day to talk to the judge about, something that was supposed to be a very logical conversation, and it did not end like the judge assumed it would. But
Okay.
he was still going to work every day, and he was still in charge of determining whether or not people needed to go to jail or not every day. He was,
Right.
sorting through different people's cases on a daily basis. He was, listening to people's facts, their lies or whatever, and determining if they should go to jail or not. He was in charge of people's, fate, so to speak, their financial, impact of their life, or of their crimes, whether or not they should go to jail. I mean, going to jail affects various aspects of someone's life. So clearly he wasn't insane enough to be in charge of all that, to be a public servant. I really don't understand how now he's trying to claim that he was insane to get off of the murder. I really just don't. I don't understand that part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of do this like the Zoom meeting. I'll call on you guys and I'll unmute you, and then when we're not talking, we'll be muted. Okay, that way we kind of take the reverb out of it. I don't know what the heck is going on, but let's do it like that. Okay.
Sounds good.
So, Andy, I'm gonna get your perspective, and then I'll start the video. Okay.
So, kind of, taking what Joy just was talking about from my perspective, and keep in mind, I'll age myself 30 plus years involved in criminal justice system and law enforcement and so forth. This sheriff, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. He murdered a judge. It's all there. It's right there in front of you. So you've got someone who's got absolutely nothing to lose. So it's what we call a dartboard. We're going to throw out the insanity defense and hopefully something sticks. There's nothing insane about him. The only thing that is insane is that he's trying to use the insanity defense when clearly he's not insane, and there's no medical documentation of anything indicating he has any mental illness or any flashbacks or whatever he wants to call it that resulted in him intentionally and knowingly killing a judge. He is looking at a life or even a potential death sentence. So you've got absolutely nothing to lose, and hoping that few jury members might buy this real pitiful excuse that you have right now. Keep in mind, he went to lunch, a part of a group with the judge earlier that day. So if you're having so-called panic attacks and all sorts of mental illness, that's kind of a strange way of exhibiting it right there. You're the one that requested to meet with the judge privately, in addition as well. And let's face facts, you got a lot of other things that were going on that probably caused you to think that maybe if I murder the judge, I might get out of it, because you were facing civil suits by female inmates that, under your charge as a sheriff, deputies were taking advantage of them in sexual situations that they shouldn't have been doing. You had a lot going on. So you're just trying to save face right now. And the bottom line is there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You intentionally and knowingly killed a Kentucky judge, and for that, you are going to pay a price.
Thank you for that. I agree. Let's get the video rolling, and then we'll stop periodically to give thoughts. And it seems to be going well now without the echoes, so we'll go from there.
Courthouse tainted by dark secrets. But on September 19th, 2024, it turned into something far deadlier. Inside the Letcher County Courthouse in Whitesburg, Kentucky, former Deputy Ben Fields had been coercing women on home incarceration into trading sexual favors as payment for ankle monitors. Fields was criminally convicted, but then a civil suit named the sheriff, Mickey Stines. He was deposed, and just days later, violence erupted in the judge's chambers. The courthouse halls suddenly echoed with gunfire. Stines pulled the trigger again and again, leaving District Judge Kevin Mullins lifeless on the floor. A judge executed, a sheriff accused, a county in shock. But why did the sheriff do it? Was he afraid? Was he paranoid, or was he full of rage? That's a question a jury in Letcher County, Kentucky will have to decide.
You know, when I first watched this, I was listening to some of the
Okay,
reports.
Chad, the sound is a little low.
Is it- Okay. When I was first listening to this, I was listening to a lot of reports coming out of the courthouse, coming out of the reporters, and they were assimilating a story already, and they were saying that possibly the judge had the teenage daughter's number in his phone, and the sheriff called the daughter from his phone twice. She didn't answer, and then he called the daughter from the judge's phone, and then she answered something to the effect of "Hey, baby," something like that. Have y'all ever heard? Did y'all hear any of that? I'll go with Andy first.
No, and trust me, if that was any validity to that, that would have already been brought out. No, the fact that no one has ever heard of it, there's absolutely been no reports of anything that the judge might have been doing that might have been nefarious. That's just strictly rumor and innuendo.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Joy? Have you heard that at all? Her screen is black, so I don't know if she's having difficulty, but we'll move on.
Peeling back the layers, trying to understand why is what this story is about. It's what the investigation is about, and it's what the trial will be about. So one of the things going on, as you heard, was a civil lawsuit. And this was all connected to that sextortion scandal inside the judge's chambers, where one of Mickey Stines, who was the sheriff, one of his deputies, was criminally convicted. Now, he was named in this civil lawsuit. And part of the civil lawsuit, when you get sued, you get deposed, which means the other side sits you down and asks you some tough questions, trying to get information from you relative to what is alleged in the lawsuit. So just a few days before the shooting, the sheriff was deposed. We have the transcripts of that deposition, and what I want to do for you is we had a couple of our producers read.
Andy, can you break that down, what that means?
Basically, in a civil suit, you had all the different parties, whether they be the plaintiffs, the person that's actually bringing the suit, and those that are actually the defendants in this case. They're giving a sworn deposition to the attorneys representing the defendants and the plaintiff as to what occurred under the auspices of the sheriff. So there was a lot of things that were going to come out that obviously wasn't going to be too complimentary, and there was a lot. I mean, this is going to be one of these ultimate Lifetime movies where you've got, I can see it right now, where you got a sheriff under his auspices, deputies running a little, almost like a brothel type of service with female inmates and bringing them to all sorts of places, including the courtroom, for sexual activity. So this was all coming out. So everything was like a cataclysmic, perfect storm. And the sheriff, that's where the buck stops. So I'm sure from his perspective, he saw this was the beginning of the end of his career, reputation, and credibility. And for whatever reason, still yet to be determined, he decided that the judge was the bad guy and needed to be taken out.
So, in your perspective, would that have been a motive?
It's a good question whether that's a motive or not, because there really isn't been a motive that's really been discussed as to why. I mean, from all intents and purposes, you had the judge and you had the sheriff. They were carrying on a conversation, and it wasn't getting out of hand. Nobody was, concerned. There wasn't yelling or screaming. It was a very calm, serene conversation, and all of a sudden you got a sheriff pulling out a gun and assassinating a judge. So there's a lot of questions that have yet to be answered, but the bottom line, if you just look at it from face value, I can't see how a jury won't be able to convict him, and the issue of, quote, him being insane or having panic attacks, emotional distress, that's kind of a red herring trying to deflect the blame, and the blame is solely on the sheriff.
Thank you for that. Welcome back, Al.
Reading the question and answer during that parts of that deposition. And I want you to take a listen to it right now.
So they told you that Ben had been fooling around with Brianna Cornett and told you that Stacey Yates had reported that there had been some sort of fooling around between Ben Fields and Sabrina Atkins. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
What about Judge Mullins? Do you think that he was aware? Did they tell you?
No, they didn't tell me. So at the time that all this started happening, I was tore up and having a bad episode, you know? So my memory is fogged.
You said that you talked to Judge Mullins. What did you and Judge Mullins talk about?
I told him that a lawsuit and stuff had been filed.
Did he not already know that?
I don't know.
Okay, well, was it your impression when you spoke to him that he was aware of that or was not aware of that prior to your conversation?
I can't recall.
Okay, so what all did you tell him?
I can't recall our conversation.
Aside from that conversation that you had with Judge Mullins on February 1st of 2022, have you had any other conversations with Judge Mullins about Ben Fields and these allegations about sexual misconduct?
I can't recall. Me and him was meeting in the office, and I told him about the allegations that was made with Sabrina.
Right.
I think he just sat there.
Just so we are clear, you are describing the conversation that happened on January 31st at 1845.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. And then I get up and say, I got to have your gun and badge. And I said, there are others. And he said, who? And I said, Brianna. And then he leaves.
You can almost feel, just by reading it, you can sense there's a lot of tension in the air. And there is oftentimes in civil lawsuits, especially when one of the parties is being deposed. But this was a big deal, a big story, and a big scandal in a small town. And this deposition is taking place just before the sheriff shoots and kills the judge that he's talking about in that deposition. Which brings us.
Al, do you have any thoughts on the event that happened of the judge shooting, or the sheriff shooting the judge? Do you have any kind of thoughts on the reasoning behind that? I mean, just any thoughts in general?
Martin, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. The volume was up before the video, and now I'm not able to hear. It doesn't seem to be on my end. I've turned my volumes all the way up. Is there something
Okay, that's
you
fine.
can do to make it louder on my end?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry. So based on what you heard him say, is there anything that you would like to interject there on any thought that you might have about him potentially having that meeting with the judge and ultimately what happened?
Sorry, I'm still not able to hear you. I
Okay.
can hear that you're talking, but I can't hear what you're saying.
You might need to turn
Go
your
ahead and hand this
volume
over
up.
to Andy.
Yeah. So we'll keep playing the video because it's a pretty long one.
To the first question in our investigation. What happened during the deposition? What was the questioning about? What was the demeanor of the sheriff? What was the atmosphere like inside that room? Joining me, the attorney whose firm held that deposition and represents the woman suing, former Sheriff Sean Mickey Stines. Ned Pillersdorf is with us. Ned, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you tonight. How much of the deposition was about the judge?
Some of it was. To put this in context, the lawsuit we filed was kind of a sweeping lawsuit. We basically alleged that there was a significant problem with the ankle bracelet program and that these women were being easily sextorted, if that's a word. One of the reasons we filed the lawsuit was we didn't think what happened to Miss Atkins and Miss Hill were isolated incidents, or Miss Cornett as well, that the reality is in Kentucky courts, lots of women are charged and they end up on ankle bracelets. Sometimes it's the only way we can keep them out of jail. And the lawsuit we filed basically alleged that this was a significant problem in the Letcher County Courthouse. Keep in mind the defendant, Fields, who eventually pled guilty, was not only running the ankle bracelet program, he was also a bailiff and deputy sheriff. So the context of the lawsuit was we named Sheriff Stines in his official capacity because our position was he knew or should have known this was going on. And in fairness to Sheriff Stines and the defendants, basically Stines denied any knowledge. I mean, that's their side of the lawsuit. The lawsuit is still pending. But the context of the lawsuit was for us to ask Stines information we had learned during our investigation.
I'm going to ask both of you one at a time. You, Andy, first. Do you believe that the sheriff had knowledge of what was going on behind closed doors?
Heck yeah, it's a small town. I mean, let's get real. I mean, everybody must have, all the different players had to have known something was going on. So for the sheriff to, quote, claim he was either innocent or oblivious, no, that's a bunch of bunk, and that kind of explains why he was just so unnerved and upset. And yeah, he was about to get exposed publicly, and your reputation was about to get tarnished all over the state of Kentucky, and pretty much this was the end of you as a law enforcement officer. Your career was now over.
Okay, another question for Elle. Do you believe that these women were violated due to their inability to pay the fees, or do you believe that they used their sexuality to possibly engage the law enforcement officer? Do you think it was more law enforcement, or do you think it was 50-50?
You
Okay,
had
back to
women.
you,
You had
Andy.
women that were in custody. Okay, you had women that were in jail. They didn't have any alternatives, and they had no recourse whatsoever. And so, from their perspective, you're caught in a major catch-22 situation if you don't comply with what you're being asked to by authorities. Then perhaps you're looking at a lengthy prison sentence as well, and certainly things aren't going to be going your way. So they're the true victims in this particular case. They didn't ask to be in the situation where they were sexually exploited in either way. So they're about as innocent as the judge is.
I agree with you on that, Andy, 100%, because the fact that they have to pay a fee on an electric monitor. See, I put electric monitors on juveniles and they don't have to pay a fee, but I've seen, working with parole and probation, I've seen people complain about the fees that they have to pay either monthly or bi-weekly or something. And I can't imagine being put in a position where somebody in authority says, "Hey, I'll make a deal with you. I'll take this off, and you don't have to pay, but you have to do sexual favors. And then when it's time for you to go to court, I'll put this back on." Have you ever heard of that at all?
Oh, I've heard of it more than you can well imagine. This is not an anomaly. This is not unusual. Unfortunately, happens in places all over the country where you have law enforcement officers and people, there's bad apples everywhere. That's just reality. And some of them take advantage, particularly of female inmates, and they recognize that they have power, that they can control them. And basically, when you control somebody's freedom, people will do whatever they can to ensure that they get some sort of freedom or get a better deal than they believe they can. So, yeah.
Thank you.
He generally denied knowledge, which I think is fair. But what was interesting about the deposition, the part you just heard where your producers read the question and answers, that's not how it happened. He was very distracted, hesitant. I don't even want to, maybe saying he was in a daze is overstating, but to me, there was something going on there. It wasn't your typical civil rights deposition in which a sheriff who's used to answering questions, being in a courtroom setting, he would be asked perfunctory questions, and it'd be these long silences. And while the deposition you read indicates, quick responses and questions and answers, that's not the reality of what happened at that deposition. My co-counsel conducted a deposition, and I came away thinking there's something going on here. Of course, we had no idea that 3 days later he'd killed the judge.
Right. And Ned, I want you to take a listen to Jeremy Bartley, who is Sheriff Stines' criminal defense attorney, talking about that deposition.
I think one of the big focal points for this particular case, and we've said this before, is the deposition. The deposition that that Mickey was giving in that particular case was scheduled for Monday, and this happened on a Thursday. So just a few days prior was this deposition, and I think in the week prior to and the week of the deposition, lots of people noticed that Mickey had become more increasingly paranoid, that he became sleepless, had gone nights without sleep. And there was an overwhelming amount of pressure on him, some internal, but we believe there were external pressures as well, because there were a lot of things that happened within these chambers that during a deposition could be potentially fair game for questions. And not only at that deposition, but if the civil case continued, then in further discovery in that case. And I think there was a lot of interest by those people who populated the judges' chambers for whatever reason about what Mickey might say in those depositions.
Al, what's your understanding of what he just said? You're muted, so you just need to hit your unmute button.
I'm still having difficulty hearing you, but I have seen the video prior to this podcast. So I think I understand a little bit about what's going on here.
Okay.
It seems as though he's having intermittent memory issues. A lot of that is very convenient, I'm sure, and appears to be, to me, very strange. I know that Lyme disease can cause memory problems. A lot of things are kind of patchy and splotchy like that. But again, we're talking about somebody who has been trusted as a public servant to review people's crimes every day. That's been his job, to go over the facts of different people's crimes and evaluate whether or not they should be arrested. This person was a very trusted, person in the community to protect people's safety. And so I don't see that really being a factor. I don't see it being logical that he suddenly is having memory problems and psychiatric issues. Clearly there's going to be a history. There's going to be a lot of, there's going to be, a long paper trail of documents from his, medical care, if that's the case. When somebody has neurological Lyme disease, everybody around them knows that they're sick. It's not something that is easy to hide. Having a conversation with someone with neurological Lyme can, be a very challenging thing because of the impact and the different symptoms that people experience. So the likeliness of everyone in a small town community, not knowing that he had neurological Lyme if he had it is very unlikely.
So they were discussing the lack of sleep. In your research on Lyme disease and things like that, is that a common symptom of that?
I'm sorry, not being able to sleep. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes, it can be. It's really hard to pinpoint specific things on Lyme, because Lyme affects each person differently that gets it. And the reason for that being is that when a tick bites a person, it empties its stomach contents into the host. So depending on the tick that bites the person, it might have a concoction of different pathogens in it that isn't in the next tick that bites the next person. So you might have one tick that bites one person that has parasites, fungus, bacteria, protozoa. There's different viruses that aren't in the next person that gets bit by a different tick. And so that's why Lyme is manifesting differently in different people. You're not going to see a consistent pattern of the same symptoms in each person with Lyme disease. So it makes, Lyme very difficult to talk about, and it also makes Lyme very difficult to predict. It's hard to say really exactly what he was experiencing. Not everyone with Lyme disease does experience insomnia,
Right.
but many people do. And, there are a lot of external pressures also that are involved in the disease when it starts progressing, because, people start being unable to work, which causes financial and, social, pressures. And it becomes quite stressful to learn how to navigate it. And I can see how that can affect sleep as well.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Andy, I have a question for you. Do you believe that a lot of these cases are gearing toward maybe medical problems or the mental aspect of the criminal act, that they're just interjecting these more than they did in the past?
I think, frankly, you just really have a lot of ticked off people in this day and age. That's why you see an advent of this relatively new phenomenon of road rage, and people are prone to anger. And with the proliferation of weapons, it makes it easy. And of course, with a sheriff, you're going to have a weapon on you anyway. So, people are on edge. They're angry, and they have no hesitation on shooting and killing anybody in this day and age. That's just reality of the world that we're living in right now.
Okay, thank you.
And it's interesting, he's talking about before, like a week before the deposition, and then after the deposition, this paranoia. Ned, I also want to put up one more piece from that deposition, because I think it's very pertinent to what Jeremy Bartley was just saying. And this is where Sheriff Stines says, slow down a little bit. And then your partner says, was there ever a time when you told Ben Fields that he wasn't allowed to use Sheriff's Department equipment or vehicle? The answer, I don't recall. I am having an episode, sorry. Was there any sort of a episodic breakdown during this deposition?
That transcript's accurate. And it was really consistent with his demeanor. And I don't know exactly how to describe it. The best way I could describe it, Vinny, when shortly after Stines was arrested, he had this, for lack of a better word, bizarre arraignment before a district court judge. And the judge asked him simple, straight ahead questions. And there were long pauses. And it was a strange situation. Here's a sheriff who's used to being in the courtroom, There's the video there. And the judge was asking him straight ahead questions. And a couple times there was like no response. So what was going on in his head, I guess it's open to wild speculation.
But what's interesting, Ned, is what's happening after all of this is the same thing from your perspective that is happening before. So whatever he was experiencing or whatever is going on with Sheriff Stines seemed to a certain extent continue as it manifested itself in his appearance and the way he was reacting and I guess communicating with people.
I believe that many people, criminal minded or not, they have an understanding of once they're in trouble, especially being a law officer, he would have the ability to know how to play the role to try to look innocent in that situation based on, the demeanor that he displayed. I did watch the body cam. I don't know a lot about this case, so if you kind of feel that I'm struggling with this a little bit, that's why. Because this is the first time that I've ever really aired anything about it. So that's why I'm struggling a little bit. And that's why I asked for some assistance tonight. Because I know that these two have more knowledge on what it's talking about than I do at this point. But I would believe that, during the body cam photo, he's kind of keep repeating, "You're gonna be fair to me, right? You're not gonna you're not gonna beat me up. You're not, if I leave this, um, I leave the building, I'll never take another breath again." And these types of statements, the people involved in, interviewing him were asking him, "You care to tell us your side of the story?" And he just kept repeating that. Um, would that be a state of catatonic, Andy?
Either that or he's very smart, he's very cunning, he's very crafty, and he knows how to game the system. I mean, that's just, you got somebody that's been in the system, so he knows exactly what he can say and what he shouldn't be able to say at this venture. So, you're looking, obviously he's well aware of what his future is looking at, and his future is bleak. And the only way he could possibly get out of it is to get the murder charge reduced to a manslaughter charge. That would at least give him a glimmer of hope. So he's going to roll the dice and throw everything out there and hope something sticks because he's in a position, he's got absolutely nothing to lose right now.
So can you explain to the audience what the difference between manslaughter and first-degree murder?
Well, first-degree murder, and especially when you kill a judge, basically means if you are found guilty, you're never going to breathe free air again. That's reality. And in the state of Kentucky, which does have the death penalty, it's possible that you could get executed. Manslaughter means that it's a reduced sentence, meaning that there was mitigating circumstances and factors that led to the actual act of taking someone else's life. It's a sudden passion type of offense, meaning that you could get anywhere from, I don't know Kentucky's law, but you can get as little as 2 years. You could actually get probation for manslaughter, or you can, at least in Texas, you can get up to 20 years on that. So the bottom line is if you do get this case reduced to manslaughter, you'll have a much better opportunity of breathing free air again eventually.
Okay, thank you for that.
People, whether it's a deposition or an arraignment.
The deposition, there were not many gotcha explosive questions. My co-counsel was very reserved, asking very professional questions, trying to get information. And for suddenly him to announce he's having a panic attack, I don't know if befuddling is the right word. It was certainly strange. I've been involved in lots of depositions in civil rights cases with public officials. That's the first time we had to stop the deposition because the public official announced he was basically having a panic attack.
Wow.
I've never heard of that ever in my lifetime. And, granted, I haven't been to a lot of depositions, but, I think that would be quite odd to just stop it and say, hold on, my client's having a panic attack. What do you think, Elle?
Um, panic attacks. Panic attacks are attacks. You know, people can't predict when they're going to have a panic attack, and you know, when you're under stress, you're more likely to have a panic attack. So I can see why that would happen to people. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that that would have actually happened. Panic attacks can happen to anyone at any time, but when you do have a tick-borne illness, they happen constantly throughout the day, and not just for like a little while. They happen for like, they can be hours at a time, where people just, you know, back themselves into a corner. And it affects the, you know, the fight or flight part of the brain. It can. They migrate because it's a bacteria that's you know, they're migrating bacteria into different parts of the brain. So, you know, different things can happen to people, and they are very severe. At the same
All right,
time,
thank
you
you.
know, the guy's having a conversation with people. He's out walking around. He's communicating with others. He's driving his vehicle. You know, everyone else thinks that he's able to do his job prior to that day that he killed the judge. You know, there's not any other signs of him, you know, from that I've seen that are indicating that he's insane. You know, the judge had every right to live, and his family had every right to see him come home. And I think that's really the important part.
Very true. Andy, what do you think would have what happened? Do you think in this situation? You think they popped him? They gave him a Xanax. I mean, do you give him a paper bag? What what would happen during this panic attack?
You know, that's really not my expertise on that. I'll punt that over to Joy on that one. I have no idea what they would do other than take a break and tell him to get his act together.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Well, let's continue on. Joy, you'll be up next, so this will be the next part for you.
There's something going on that I guess mental health professionals may help us try to explain one day. I just thought it was unusual, bizarre, and it certainly was a most atypical deposition, but he didn't really say much of substance.
Right, so it wasn't the substance of it. It was almost like just being in that position. Ned, stand by. We've got some more for you coming up in the program. But coming up next, what was the sheriff afraid of?
First thing he said to the investigators was, I'm concerned that they were going to take or have taken my wife and daughter.
See, that glove won't fit OJ, and if you don't ask him to try it on, I will.
Why do an experiment for the first time in front of a jury?
Who said that?
Chad, I said he was with Mickey. Mickey used to do the same thing when he was over house arrest.
So this is one of the victims of this sextortion scandal, but talking about videos that may or may not exist involving the judge and Mickey Stines engaging in this conduct. She said she saw the judge doing it. She heard about Mickey Stines' involvement in all of this. So, I mean, that's an interesting concept. Like, how big is this scandal? Well, no one else has been arrested. No one else has been charged. But is there more out there?
Well, Elle, I want to ask you a question. If you were an advocate for a female that gave you an outcry of basically, I'm having this situation happen, or I need some help, what would you say to any woman in this position that had experienced any kind of trauma based on the sexploitation? How would you advocate for them?
I'm still having a difficult time hearing you. I'm not sure what that's about. Are you asking what I would say to the women who are being exploited?
Yes.
Well, I mean, got to be a very difficult position to be in because you're, these women are out of prison with a monitor, an ankle monitor on, right? So they're kind of at the mercy of people who are in a greater position of power, which is how they've been able to be taken advantage of. It seems that they did the right thing by finding an attorney who was able to represent them. It's not right for anyone to take advantage of their position of power, especially like for, their own sexual gratification. Like that's kind of broadly accepted as like the wrong thing to do. Um, so I'm not sure what I would say to them. I
Okay.
mean, their crimes are what landed them in prison in the first place. But they obviously did their time, and then they were, considered to be all right to be released. That has to be a very unfortunate thing to happen. I'm not sure what to say. I really just,
Okay,
I
that's
think
fine.
that, I think it's an unfortunate situation.
Thank you.
It'd be curious to
I'm sorry. Go
know
ahead.
if he was actually involved in that, or if he, why he was named in those civil cases.
Andy, you work for Crime Stoppers, right? So I don't know how that program works. Maybe you could give us some insight, but I'm trying to take I'm trying to give the audience some knowledge. If they're dealing with this in the world, like being trafficked or something, and they get away, what's some kind of information you would give somebody if they were in a position to be exploited by somebody in power? How would they get out of that?
Well, first of all, their civil rights were being exploited. Their civil rights were being violated, period. And so you have different organizations like we have in Harris County, and we've had this happen before with inmates in jail whose civil rights were violated, and we've had certain cases in which jailers have taken advantage of inmates for sexual favors as well. That's number one. Number two, a crime was committed on them. They are a victim of a crime because you had someone in power. That is a criminal offense. So criminal charges were obviously filed in this particular case as well. So number one, your civil rights were violated. Number two, you're now a victim of a crime. And since you're a victim of a crime, you're entitled to certain rights being a victim of a crime. So there's a lot of resources that are available. Harris County, we have more victims organizations, which is great, but it's also sad, the reality that we have to have so many as well. But there's a bunch of different human trafficking organizations that we work with as Crime Stoppers, and we try to make sure that if you are a victim of human trafficking or you are a victim of being exploited by those that are in power, that we get those resources to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, because I mean, even though we're watching this, we really don't have a horse in the race. So, I mean, some of this stuff that comes along in these cases, I like to get the information out to the viewer just in case they know somebody who knows somebody who might need some help. Because a lot of times, if you don't know where to go, you feel trapped, you feel very isolated from any kind of help. And that is part of the theory of a person that's exploiting you is if I keep you away from everybody that could potentially help you, then I have the control and I have the power over you. Would you agree, Elle? Joy? Would you agree?
Are you talking to me? I'm having a really
Yes.
hard time hearing you.
That's okay.
Yes, I think that what I heard you say was that people who do take advantage of other people who are in positions of power do isolate their victims. Is that what you're asking me if I agree with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes, I do agree with that. I think it makes people, you know, weak. You know, people are more powerful in numbers, and you know, people get validation and you know, confidence in what they think and what they believe from other people that they trust. So that is part of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's continue on with the video.
I want you to the reason I'm asking that is she's trying to uncover or figure out what's going on with Sheriff Mickey Stines. Here's his attorney who spoke to us, Jeremy Bartley, talking about the statements that the sheriff makes immediately after shooting and killing Judge Mullins.
And one of the things that we've talked about from the beginning is the fact that the first thing he said to the investigators was, I'm concerned that they were going to take or have taken my wife and daughter. We believe that that Mickey believes strongly that his wife and daughter and family were in imminent danger. Now, we believe at the same time that the pressure and anxiety and other factors that I'm not going to discuss tonight, we'll leave that for another day. But we believe that his mental health had been impaired and certainly was accelerated due to this civil deposition.
All right, danger or afraid of exactly who doing exactly what?
My question exactly. He was a sheriff. How would he be so afraid of anybody hurting his wife or his child? Wouldn't he have the capability to ask for some kind of protection for those people, Andy?
He would, but I truly believe he was so deep into this and he was implicated. And that's probably, I can well imagine in his position, his whole world was caving in right now. Everything was going to end. So I'm sure that he just felt like the walls were closing on him and there was nothing much that he could do about any of this. And this was the perfect storm, the end for him.
You know, I've been in different panels and I've heard different people talk on different cases, and for the most part, people don't believe that you reach that level of insanity in your mind where you're trying to just protect yourself from everything, like you said, closing it around you, and you make irrational decisions such as shooting a judge. Just try to save yourself. Have you seen? I mean, you've obviously seen a lot of crime throughout your career. Is this a pretty spot on phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's, you know, I look back and I'll give you an analogy. Andrea Yates, who murdered her 5 young children, drowned them in a bathtub, and she pled not guilty by reason of insanity. There was documented mental illness for years with her. Everything was documented, so you could reasonably believe that she was insane when she drowned her kid. You could believe that mental illness played a role. With the sheriff, there's nothing. There's zero. There's nothing. And you're just being totally selfish from my perspective. You don't, there's the only reason that all of a sudden now is because you have nothing left to play. So there are those that truly are mentally ill, and we've seen it because I've seen people that are in institutions for that. They're not competent, but there's history there. There's no history with you. You're just conjuring up, hoping that something will stick for you. So for me, that's even worse because you're putting a stigma on for those who truly are mentally ill, who truly have issues, who truly suffer from the types of symptoms that he claims he has. And now you're putting a label on them as well. So shame on you.
And that's powerful stuff you said there. History being the operative word, like you said, he didn't have a history. There wasn't a history of mental illness. And now the fact that he's doing this to try to escape culpability, like you said, it's just disgusting.
Brings us to the next question in our investigation. And it might be difficult to answer some of these because of what's going on in the sheriff's mind, but what was the sheriff afraid of? And whatever he's afraid of, is it based in reality or is it part of a paranoid delusion? Joining me, the host of Hillbilly Crime on YouTube. She has closely followed this case from the beginning. Elizabeth Jones is with us, and clinical and forensic neuropsychologist and author of the book, The New Rules of Attachment, Dr. Judy Ho. Great to have you both here. Elizabeth, let me ask you, what is the fear? Is it actual fear? Is there talk that his family was actually in danger?
Well, I have an evolving theory now. Ever since we read those depositions and I noticed that Daniel Dotson was there with Mickey in person as his personal representation, we went and tried to find an entry of appearance for him. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, but I've been told that he would probably have to have one filed somewhere, and we can't find that. And I kind of just feel like there was a level of intimidation there when he was given his deposition. Someone babysitting him, making sure he didn't say the wrong thing.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. So let me ask you, because his attorney kind of is talking about this, Dr. Judy Ho, talking about the reality of him being scared and there being some basis in reality for it, but he's also having some level of a breakdown at the same time. So how does that work? And is the fear, if there is some factual basis for it, does it get exaggerated? Does it get twisted? What happens if someone is at the same time that there is something happening, like really happening, and they're also having a mental breakdown relative to it?
Well, I'm going to stop the video right there, and I want to thank my guests for being up here tonight. We've given some great information and some great thought. I believe in the presumption of innocence, just like with any other case. But when it comes to the public opinion, there is a difference. I believe that this man is guilty of killing this judge. The video showed it. People are going to say, well, you didn't see his face. But yet, you look at the body cam, you see him from the back, you see him from the front. It's the same company shirt he's wearing. It's gray. He's wearing those jeans. He's wearing those shoes. I mean, the presumption of innocence is there. But in my mindset, I believe the man is guilty, and I believe that he needs to pay the price. What do you think, Andy?
I think you're looking at two options here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. He's guilty. You can't dispute what's on video, bottom line. The real question is he going to get life without parole? Is he going to get the death penalty? Or is he going to get lucky and roll the dice and get a manslaughter charge? Either way, his life in prison is not going to be pretty. They can't keep him in general population because he's a sheriff, so he's going to be in administrative segregation wherever he lands for a long time. And that's just not a very good existence.
Can you explain what ag-sag is?
Basically, you've got inmates that have to be protected from other inmates. And you can't have someone who's a sheriff who had put people in jail and in prison walking around a prison in a normal prison setting. There's going to be people out there looking for revenge. So from a prison management perspective, you have to protect him. And the only way to do that is to ensure that he's not around other inmates. And for that, you're going to have to be locked up almost on a 24/7 with basically an hour a day where you get to do anything. And again, that's in a confined area.
Thank you. And that is a terrible existence for anybody. I can't imagine being locked down away from population when you've been, free, and then all of a sudden you're on the other side of the coin. Just a terrible existence, I would believe, but it's a terrible case whatsoever. Hopefully, we'll hear more about it. And I'd love to have you two up on this panel as we hear more toward the trial and more stuff comes out, and also with some other cases. So, once again, thank you so much. Andy, we will be looking at the Oxygen channel. We will be looking for your show, and you're much appreciated here on this panel.
You bet. All right.
Thank you. Joy, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything
Thank
you'd
you for
like to
having
say
me.
to the chat before we hop down?
I would like to just say that there is treatment for people who do have neurological Lyme symptoms. If that's something that he actually really does have, then that's something that does need to be treated. I'm sure that he will likely continue to have problems as he's imprisoned. And I would like to say that when you're sick, you're sick. When you're having problems that affect your decision making, it's your own responsibility to get yourself medical attention, and that's something that he failed to do prior to this incident happening. It was his responsibility to protect and serve the community, and he failed to do that. So I think that it's still his, it's his responsibility to take accountability for that. Thank you for having
Exactly.
me.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm gonna bring y'all down, and I'm gonna close out the show. Thank you so much. Okay, to the rest of you, I am gonna close this show out, and then I'm gonna shift gears, and I'm gonna go back into While Idaho Slept. I'm gonna read some more of that book, so y'all be looking for the next live to start. Y'all have a wonderful night, and keep this case in the back of your mind so that we can discuss it from time to time. Maestro, cue that music.